Hello and welcome to the CFB Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and I still have a frog in my throat, but that's okay because we don't take days off around here on the FTN Network. We are ready to rock and roll the final classic regular season slate of the year. It is wild to think it was only 13 to 14 short weeks ago where we were playing week 0 against that media-driven USC defense is going to be so improved. And our boy Nick Nash came through with the ham of ham to start us off the season right. And now we're into conference championships. Next week, there's a showdown slate between Army and Navy. Woo! And then we have bowl season. So lots of coverage, all kinds of stuff. We are going to talk about the 8-game slate here, pre-lock show. Article is up on the slate. My fault. Apparently, I sent the wrong one, so that was my mistake at 2 in the morning. CBB article is up. CFB article is up. The Thursday CFB Super Show is still available to watch on demand for those of you catching up. And we're going to be able to answer your questions here leading up to lock for the final iteration of the season. So for the bowl season, we're going to actually have plenty of content, write-ups for each slate, and there'll be a couple of shows, 2, 3, for the biggest slates. Slate 1 of bowl season, which is going to be 7 to 8 games. There will be a show for that. All right. Also, scrolling at the bottom there, the code NIGHTHOOPS is still valid for 50% off your first month subscription at FTN Daily. Definitely want to take advantage of that while you still can. It will not be around for very much longer, so please check us out for at least 1 month. Get that access to all sports, pro, E, and college, written content, shows on behind the paywall, optimizers, projections, ownership talk, coffee, candy canes, shoe polish. You name it, we got it. We do it. All right. What is up, Day? Brett, Brett, my man, Brett, long time grinder with us. Glad to see he is a member of the FTN community now. This season has flown by. I don't know where it went. It's just nuts. Yeah, let's go right into FanDuel. Day. So pretty much similar to what I had on DraftKings and what I gave Jaden Mieva for UNLV with Ricky White. I'm doing the double, pair stack for UNLV as my core on both sides. CJ Baxter on FanDuel, but also on DraftKings. Mekhi Hughes on DraftKings, but also on FanDuel. So I'm pretty much in alignment there with my player pools on both sides. I'm not really the games are the same. So player wise, there aren't a huge amount of price differences. There are some more expensive guys than they are on DraftKings, but one way or another, I want to work out and fit them into my lineup in that group of Hughes, Baxter, Kamani Vidal, White, Maeva, Barber for Troy, one of the FSU receivers potentially on DraftKings. It's kind of the group that I'm looking at there. Was there worse firing than Navy booting Kenny M? I don't know, man. There's been some pretty bad ones, but that's certainly not great. Hell of a win last night. Probably took 2 years off your life. Good luck today. I was not well. At halftime, I was like just throwing up everywhere, basically, figuratively speaking. And the third quarter happened, and Oregon scores, immediately. I had to go into the tilt tank, which I don't do as much anymore. Pre-ban of CUB, I those of you who knew me before at my old site, like I really would tilt like to an obnoxious level, but I think everybody grew to love it. And I was like anyone that would listen on Twitter. I was using Twitter. I was really going hard last night and went into the Twitter timeline and just started posting about how, this one hurts. This one's going to be bad to take. Oregon wins. So obvious, just dropping take after take and sacrifice after sacrifice. And I'm sure people were muting me last night, but got the job done. My good friend Rob, who I've known for a decade now, a known jinxer, like one of the worst in the industry, threatening to take the Huskies all week, but as a good friend should, he goes ahead and bets a large sum on Oregon, takes the big fat L there for me. He'll be all right. That guy's rich. and Washington gets it done. So locked into a 3, the third spot, right? So no matter what, I think we're going to be in the 2-3 game in Pasadena. Old school Rose Bowl. So let's go. Huskies own the Rose Bowl. I'll have to break out some of my vintage Rose Bowl 1990-91 t-shirts for the shows, because I'm certainly excited. And at this point, like I really hope they obviously win a game. I'd love to see them win the entire thing. But that last night was the most important football game of my life, even more so than the back-to-back Super Bowl appearances for the Seahawks. If you know me, I love college sports more than pro sports anyways. Not a fair weather fan. Love the Seahawks. Love seeing that era of Super Bowl runs. And those were certainly exciting. But last night's game was easily the most excited I've ever been for a football game, the most nervous I've ever been for a football game. And just being able to beat Oregon twice in 1 year and shut those fans up permanently until next year, because they never truly shut up, just felt good. And the Freezing Cold Takes Twitter last night was dropping some heaters. The amount of people who are like, this is a lifetime wealth opportunity, bet the house on Oregon plus or -9.5, and just like all this stuff where it's like, fraud. You don't watch football. You don't know what you're talking about. It's trendy to talk about Oregon. Oh, they're so good, but there's a 12-0 team here. Oregon lost to this 12-0 team. Obviously, the Huskies, Penix hasn't been playing quite as well. I concede he's not the Heisman anymore. I'll give you that, but this kid by the name of Dylan Johnson, you may have heard of him from the SEC, has suddenly, paid the bills, as they say, as one of the best transfers in all of college football. Throws a touchdown off a trick play, scores 2, just completely gashes that Oregon rush defense. Just a great feeling. Even if you had nothing riding on Oregon, Washington, like that's not your teams or your conference, or you don't care, and you kind of live vicariously through me on it. You have to feel good about that. Oregon losing, you have to absolutely feel good. And we have the Oregon Clucks on the basketball slate today. So if they could double lose, that would be even better. All right, let's get into the slate here, or talk about the different variations of what's going on. 91 team was very solid. All right, looking at the various injury news, the main one, of course, is Tate Rodemaker for Florida State. Not because we're looking to use a quarterback for FSU, but mainly because the wide receivers for Florida State are enormously cheap. The prices on Keon Coleman at 5.2 on DraftKings and Johnny Wilson at 4.9 are just really hard to ignore. As it stands right now, I have a man, Caden Robinson from Troy, penciled in there, who's 5K. He was 3% owned last time they were on the slate and blew up, and he's been playing really well. I do have a fair amount of this Fun Belt Championship game. So at this moment, I am playing Robinson over both Wilson and Coleman. And obviously the games are 4 hours apart, so it's going to be a decision. I guess I will gauge how my first portion of the lineup goes, as long as UNLV does what they're supposed to in the first 30 minutes of the game. Then maybe I can afford to back off and wait. Maybe we'll get some further information, but a true game time decision is Rodemaker. Potentially the freshman Brock Len having the start. Very minimal mop-up duty throughout the year. He threw 3 passes in week 12, 1 in last week. Did have a rushing score in that blowout game in week 12, so really tough. But Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson are both otherworldly talents, and I know that price is really hard to get away from. I do feel weird about it. Louisville's defense is top-notch. You're throwing a freshman into the fire. There was weather concerns at least a couple of days ago. I feel like the ownership is going to balloon on both of those guys. And I'm okay just playing the 5% rostered Caden Robinson again, because he doesn't really have to worry about touches right now. He's the clear WR1. And I could see this Florida State game going sideways in a hurry. That being said, if you have multiple lineups, you obviously want to keep exposure to them. In some of them, it's just a really tough decision for me in Maine. And I'm ending up finding myself with the two late hammer games not having much. Michigan and Iowa and Louisville, Florida State are my two least favorite games on this slate. But I do see and a lot of people playing those Florida State wide receivers. So keep that in mind. Other opportunities for low ownership: Toledo's quarterback DeQuan Finn. I whiff the ownership about as hard as I'll ever whiff it. Usually I'm pretty good about at least having an idea. I thought he'd be much higher owned against CMU, like a dream matchup for him, right? But it was turned out to a blowout game. They didn't really need to use him much, so he ended up being a bust. Price is 7-8 now, which is extremely advantageous, and I think that against Miami of Ohio, he's going to have an opportunity to kind of light the slate on fire. One of him or Penny Boone is definitely going to put up a slate-breaking score, so I am considering using one of them. But with that being said, it's a 4 running back slate for me. And what even more exciting is the fact that other sites, other people around the industry and publications are now talking about the not using a quarterback in the super flex strategy. They don't call it the house of 4 running backs, of course, because that would be blatantly copying, but people starting to mention how one quarterback lineups could be optimal, and wow, this is a new way to build. And it's like, where were you 3 years? Great idea. But so we might see an actual lot of one quarterback lineups on this slate, which is, makes that, as the president and member of the house of 4 running backs, makes me, proud, but also like, I don't know, a little protective of that build. Like I'm a little worried. I do think people are going to play wide receiver in the super flex today instead of a running back, though, which feels like a mistake. There are at least 6 or 7 running backs on this slate that you could use. Obviously, Kamani Vidal, got to play him for Troy, lots of volume. Mekhi Hughes for Tulane, got to play him, lots of value. CJ Baxter, good to go. Cheap. Oklahoma State defense, trash, got to play him. And then that leaves you with either Penny Boone, one of the Boise State running backs, or I guess, a Georgia guy. But for me, I'm kind of zeroing in on Ashton Genty. 8K is an expensive price, but the tipping point is Boise State's wide receiver room being so ordinary without McAllister, and the fact that Genty has over 500 receiving yards, basically a de facto slot receiver there. They're able to play him and Holani on the field together. It takes some of that rushing upside and those carries away from Ashton, but his passing and receiving work, targets, aren't going to go away. And I think there's going to be an opportunity for him to put up a huge score here. And I think people are starting to overlook him a little bit. Also, Roydell Williams at 4K on DraftKings against Georgia. Not a great spot, but we talked about it on the show. He's not a scrub. He was one of the top prospects coming out of high school as a running back, top 10 on most sites for recruiting rankings. Hasn't been able to work out as well at the collegiate level, but again, we're not having a guy coming in off the street. We're not having a walk-on. We're having a guy with true pedigree who can play. If he gets 10 to 15 touches at 4K, he's good enough, right? So that's something to consider as well. So quarterbacks, lean. Running backs we like a lot, and then wide receivers, it really just comes down to risk tolerance there. White is obvious, will be chalk across the board. And then I think you play like Brazel, who's at 5'4", he's there. The FSU guys we mentioned, Caden Robinson, who I feel strongly about, or one of the Oklahoma State receivers. We'll see a lot of ownership on Brendan Presley, who's there at 5'5". He has 33 targets in 2 games, just a ridiculous amount of work. I think Texas will be, shadowing him tough. They're going to probably, send a second defender his way. Rashad Owens at 4'8" has a nice GPP upside at lower ownership, or even Leon Johnson at 5K, who again burned his red shirt and has been very, very consistent and one of Alan Bowman's favorite targets. Those are both 2 leverage spots off a chalkier Brendan Presley. I think I'm getting sick. What a time to get sick. Last year around this time, I got so sick I had to go to the hospital from the flu, which was just awful. awful stuff. So, but tis the season to get sick, especially when you have kids going to school and licking stuff and touching stuff and gross kids. They said it would be a good idea to have kids, but still on the fence about that. Still on the fence. And I don't know. What do you guys want to talk about? Let's see. What do you guys want to talk about? SMU running backs. Jesus, LJ Johnson. How did that hurt, man? I'm still trying to find my testes after that one where he just doesn't play. Rhett Lashley, the head coach of SMU, a couple of days ago, in a very cute manner, saying LJ Johnson will be available, expected to play. I'm fully anticipating Johnson getting 20 plus carries against Tulane, probably putting up a 25-30 fantasy point game with nobody on him a week after we were using him. So just be prepared for that. If you're running multiple builds, you probably want to have exposure to Johnson just in case. But honestly, I'm not using him, but played DFS long enough to know that is a real possibility. If you want a little bit of a sneak weather game and Louisville maybe becomes a DFS problem where there's just going to be very physical, maybe low scoring, at 3-4 for Louisville, we have Joey Gatewood. Gatewood has been around the block. He's played for multiple teams. He's played multiple positions. He does have 2 touchdowns in 2 of his last 3 games. This would be a game I foresee getting maybe a target spike here. Thrash probably not being very successful. They're going to have to try and, move the ball with little chunk plays and short yardage stuff. And I think Gatewood could see like a little 5 for 50 and a touchdown type game at 3-4. So nice little GPP value there that nobody's going to be on. Feels pretty comfortable there. Texas, if you can't get to a guy like Xavier Worthy, who I think is going to have a lot of ownership. I do like AD Mitchell at 5.7. And of course, a classic FTN play, the tight end Jatavian Sanders at 3.7. Just super cheap. He hasn't had anywhere near the season he did last year. And to start the year off, he looked like he was going to continue on, right? Like 3 straight games, over 12 fantasy points, a touchdown in the first game, back-to-back 100-yard games against Bama and Baylor. And since then, he's just completely fallen off the cliff. There has been a lot of running for this team. And when they do throw, Mitchell and Worthy tend to get most of that work. So Sanders is not a safe play by any means, but 3.7, a throwback for us. I could see him actually finding the end zone here against this Oklahoma State defense, and he makes a lot of sense. Again, another really cheap player that isn't going to carry a very high ownership whatsoever. Hey, Alex, what's up, buddy? DraftKings score, no problem for coming in late, man. So the UNLV stack, Mavia, the quarterback with Ricky White, like that pairing, it's going to be chalky, but it's just so good. And then Mekhi Hughes, Kamani Vidal, and CJ Baxter. I know that's, 3 running backs there, but I'm kind of just plugging those guys in on both sites. Feel pretty comfortable with them. And I am leaning towards the 4 running back build, which is pretty typical for me. Favorite cheapy receivers, kind of just talked about some there. I almost forgot. The Troy receivers. So that it would be the other way that I'm going. In addition to Robinson, the Florida State receivers, a couple of those GPP shots we just talked about. The Troy receivers are way too cheap, especially their top 2. Jabre Barber, who comes in at 4.4 on DraftKings. Real reliable PPR target, and then Chris Lewis, who is more of a deep threat and touchdown machine at 4.7. Prefer Lewis as the GPP shot at 4.7 and Barber as a main team staple. He has been really good. Gunnar Watson, who is only 6K, deserves consideration in all formats. Honestly, I wouldn't mind using him in main if you do end up going there as well. Barber leads the team in targets with 93, 61 receptions, 841 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Lewis, 29 catches, 633 yards, and 9 touchdowns, 22 yards per reception. Deep threat all the way, touchdown machine, but Barber is just far safer. I'm telling you guys, this Fun Belt game, it's going to be on the high. I feel pretty passionately it's going to be on the high scoring side. I think people are going to play Barber. There'll be a little bit of Lewis, and then they're obviously Vidal. But the rest of the game is going to, I think, be on the lower owned side. And I don't know if people are going to play Vidal with Barber as often as they probably should. I think they'll probably go one or the other. Vidal being expensive, people might talk themselves out of it, especially in 2 quarterback lineups. So we can expect a ton of Barber, some Vidal, and then probably nobody else. I think this one calls for a lineup with Gunnar, Watson, Aguilar, Vidal, Barber, Robinson. I wouldn't probably use a running back from Appy State. They in years past they've kind of done us well there, but they're playing 5, 6, 7 guys. It feels like I would strictly play the passing game of App State. Aguilar and Watson are both getting a huge amount of volume. This is going to be a fun one. I don't foresee this one being a defensive struggle. Probably hanging myself out to dry there. It'll be 3-0, but pre-lock, that one feels like a very good spot to be overweight compared to the rest of the field. What's up, Don? Hopefully you recovered from the NC State fiasco the other night. I know that was a rough day, but back again. Appreciate you supporting the show and the network. My favorite game from a betting perspective. Let's look at what updated odds are. So Tulane was 3. This is strange. I'm pretty sure that Tulane was 3.5 on the show the other night, -3.5 versus SMU. DK now has it -3. So if that's the case, color me confused. Let me see here. Because I think Tulane handles business here easily. Okay, yeah, 3 points. I mean, I'm betting the Tulane money line. I'm betting -3. I'm kind of betting all of that. SMU has no business being only 3-point underdogs to Tulane. Honestly, it's a situation where it's a very favorable matchup for Tulane. Pratt is a absolute machine. I feel very, very confident in betting Tulane. That is the top team for me today. I also like a little bit of App State money line sprinkled in there. I think they have a chance to beat Troy as well. But yeah, that Tulane game is just really, really great. All right. Give me a second. I need to take a quick break, but I will be right back. All right, sorry about that. Speaking of Rugrats, had one like just continually saying the same word over and over again, and that extremely distracting. Had to make it stop. All right, we're good now. Always a fun time when one of the Waddell children knows that what I'm doing out here, but consistently has to call for me regardless. All right, let's check into the Discord and see what we got going on here. Rolling Boone, Baxter, Vidal, and Hughes today. That is a strong quartet of options. We're assuming Benson's going to get a lot of work tonight. I mean, yeah, but Louisville probably assumes that as well. So the passing game is going to have to at least be somewhat adequate. I'll tell you, this could actually be a game in which we see Jaheim Bell matter. He hasn't been flexing the way that we thought he would. Pretty consistently, 3 catches, 30 yards. Sometimes he scores. Hasn't been the great season that I was expecting from him. He hasn't gotten any carries. They, really since the beginning of the season, they've taken that away from him, and it's really hurt his upside. But this is a game where I think short yardage stuff is going to come into play a lot, which is why I was thinking on the other side with Gatewood, but for the same reasons, Jaheim Bell makes a lot of sense there at 4-2. Most people are just going to gloss right over him, go right up to Johnny Wilson or Keon Coleman. But I could see a situation in which Glenn is throwing in a safety valve to Bell repeatedly in this one. So wanted to bring that up. But otherwise, the question is CJ Baxter, Brock Bowers, or Xavier Worthy and Trey Benson. So contest dependent. I don't think you can fade Baxter. Like, I don't know if he's fadeable in SE because the matchup is just glorious, as they say, and figure he's got to be getting somewhere between 18 to 25 touches, whether that's, some targets in the passing game or 20 carries, like some variation of that. He's going to get a lot of work. If he was 6'6", I think the fade would be a lot more interesting and feasible. But at 5'6", it doesn't call to me, especially when Jaden Blue sits there at 6K. Obviously had the big game, but still just on 10 carries there against another poor defense in Texas Tech. Baxter he's a really strong play. Way too difficult to get away from him. I don't see it. So that would be my play there, Baxter and Bowers. Now, it feels bad not having – I don't actually have any Brock Bowers, but I'm never going to sit there and be like, no, don't play him. Going up against Alabama, he's done just fine against them throughout the course of his career. They held him out, last week because he really wasn't needed. It's pretty obvious they were going to win that game, and they did. 7-4s and a lot of salary to dedicate. But if ever, you wanted to pay up in a very important spot like this with the title on the line, Brock Bowers is that guy. Much more play him, much more willing to play him than Ladd McConkey, who may or may not actually be 100%. Bowers is just a freak. I feel like Bowers would play with a broken bone in a game like this, so I'm not really worried about him. My brain is telling me to fade Chalk Baxter and pay up for running back to get different. I don't know that paying up at running back is all that different. But there's not a lot of, unless people are going to go Roydell and Baxter in their main, which I don't know if that's very good. If Baxter gets 20 to 25 touches, like he probably will, he'll get 20 plus fantasy points. Yeah, you're right. I don't see any way around that. Also have a weird feeling we get a Rashad Owens pop-off game while Presley gets all the ownership. That would be a very DFS-like thing. I refer to that as the DFS gods getting a chuckle out of screwing with the industry. I'm like the most superstitious person in the entire world. I would challenge you to meet someone more superstitious than me. Like, you come over to my house for a beer. You'll probably see a rabbit's foot somewhere, a horseshoe, floor-leaf clovers, a cauldron. Like, I'm super superstitious. And I would agree. Owens going off while Presley gets like 2 for 20 would not surprise me. Very few things actually surprise me now when it comes to DFS. I'm very battle hardened in that regard. All right, stacking Boise State UNLV might be the way to go. Yeah. Let's see. Milrow questions. Great GPP play. Wouldn't use him in main 9K, but his rushing upside with McClellan likely out is pretty high. I think we see a lot of more not only designed runs from Milrow, but I think we see opportunities where if the play breaks down, he won't be afraid to take off. With Georgia keeping things in front of them, there will be room for, 5, 6, 7 yard plays to accumulate, and Milroe does make sense in that regard. But I'd be a GPP play. I wouldn't be paying up at quarterback in your main lineup. Certainly not a move for me. Seeing a lot of Roydell Williams lineups or questions in the Discord. Kind of gone over that already. Somebody saying they hope McClellan plays. Probably doesn't want to play Roydell Williams. Can't. I don't blame you. It's not like he's a super exciting play by any means. All right, let's see. Let's go into PrizePicks. There's a couple here that I really like with the most updated board. Come on, stop. All right, Mekhi Hughes over 19.5 fantasy points. I feel like he's going to be right in there in 25-point range. Caden Robinson over 13.5 fantasy points. I'm really riding this Caden Robinson play. It's going to be a make or break play for sure, but I'm very confident with him, and he's a hell of a lot better than what we normally have on the low-owned receiver spectrum. We usually have some pretty lean plays there at the low-owner spot for us. Robinson is a very good one to have. I'm feeling pretty confident in him today. Jaden Maivia over 19.5 fantasy points. I just feel like he crushes it today. Very good spot for him. Passing yardage. Actually, passing plus rushing yardage. That is one that we've done well with. Sticking with Jaden Maivia. 271.5 pass plus rushing yards. I'm taking the over there against Boise State. We also have Taylon Green at 216.5 passing plus rushing yards. I think both of those guys hit their over on that. That is a category that I want a lot of. So I'm on both of those guys. And then receptions here. Ricky White is 7.5 receptions. I know that's a high number, but if he doesn't hit 10 for 150 and 2 today, it would be an absolute shock. Absolute shock. I think he gets peppered. I think we see a very Brennan Presley-like target game for Ricky White. He may be seeing somewhere between 15 to 20 targets in this one. Like real life. Real life, as Bluey says. Shout out to any of you parents out there that know what Bluey is. Not a bad show until you have to watch it on repeat every episode for a year. Touchdown props. Let's go. I gotta get to DK. I gotta get to DK before too long here. Anytime touchdown props. There are two that I really like. I just want to make sure I give you the right props. Penny Boone minus 125. That's a strong bet. Sitting there for Toledo, looking for Toledo to have a big game today. Mekhi Hughes, anytime touchdown at minus 175. It's nowhere near the plus 400. We're probably, I just keep saying like that was just a dream situation. We're never going to get one like that. But anything from plus 100 to minus 200, I feel good enough about, and we can parlay them in some stuff. But those two anytime touchdown props are definitely appealing to me. Rushing props, most of the relevant rushers are projected over 100 yards. Genty and Holani splitting carries makes this tough, but they're both in the mid 70s range, like 74.5 for Holani, 77.5 for Ashton. I do like the over 77.5 for Ashton. I think this is a game that he puts up the 100 rushing yards and 100 receiving yards and just completely obliterates. So keep that in mind while you're making your lineups today. He's not one that you want to fade by any means. We also get a receiving prop for Ashton Genty, 29.5 receiving yards, slamming the over on that. I'm pretty committed to Genty. On Thursday night, I wasn't sure. The 8K was kind of a secondary play for me, but as I built today and looked around, it made way too much sense to have him. So that's where I will go with the majority of my props. All right. I think that's it, guys. I think we're in it. We're feeling good. I will be available in the Discord for a majority of the day. Probably going to get a nice little midday nap in there somewhere, but we're grinding college basketball. We're grinding college football. Will be some starting lineups posted in the CBB room throughout the day as well. I will keep track of the news, the main one being Tate Rodemaker, barring anything unforeseen. Just remember to be ready. As we get into bowl season, there will be late scratches, unreported late scratches of guys that you didn't even know were on the chopping block suddenly decide that they don't want to play. You'll have some guys who play a quarter and decide they don't want to play the rest of the game. You'll have all kinds of shenanigans that happen here in the bowl game. So something to be aware of, but it is fun. Lots of great contests, money-making opportunities, and we're going to be grinding the entire way through it. Thanks, everyone who continues to support the show. We will see you next time. Next show coming up Monday night, the CBB version of the show. We'll be taking most of next week off for college football, except for the Army-Navy game. And then we'll be back up in it next Thursday night for the CFB Super Show, covering the first slate of bowl games. Crazy that we're already there. Thanks, guys. Best of luck. Win lots of money today, and I'll catch you guys later.